Thanks so much for being here. When the pandemic started, some of the first closures were bars, restaurants, retail, and we know what those workers make an hour. They are probably a group of workers who are one paycheck away from not being able to pay their bills. The governor quickly determined he did not want any more homeless people at that particular point, and quickly called for the eviction moratorium. We quickly realized he wasn't forgiving rent, which meant their bills would just continue to be added up. And so in the first go-round, we had a $100 million housing assistance that we worked hard to get out the door because we wanted to protect the tenants, but also the landlords who had bills to pay. And so that particular piece happened. Now we're nearing the end. But there are, I think I just read, 69,000 households in Minnesota who owe more than $214 million in back rent. And that means we have to be very careful about how we move out of this particular time. And so we have what's called an off-ramp for the eviction moratorium that has to be very carefully structured so that it protects everyone and that it gives everyone time. Here's the good news. We have a lot of federal money, over $500 million, that can pay these bills, but that takes some time. And so the timeline and how everyone prepares becomes so crucial. So the bill we refer to as an off-ramp for the eviction moratorium. And it's relatively simple, but there are a few pieces around which we continue to have conversation. You'll be hearing from a number of speakers today about why this is so important, and I'm joined first of all by Representative Ibe.
Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Esther Ibe and I represent House District 59B, which is the area of downtown Minneapolis and parts of the north side. So as we've heard today, it is vital that we come to a deal on an orderly and clear off-ramp from the eviction moratorium. In addition to providing that appropriate time to make sure that people and landlords get the rental assistance they need, we also need to make sure that renters' housing records do not become even more collateral damage in this pandemic. In Minnesota, once a landlord files an eviction, that record sticks to a person's file for years to come. The record does not fall away even when the renter prevails or the judge dismisses the case for other reasons. It comes up again and again that the person was quote-unquote evicted, even though that may never have been the case. So what does that mean for tenants? It makes it much harder to find a new place to live should they want to move, and they can be denied future housing on that single fact based on their tenant screening record. And as we've said, it's a barrier to new housing, which we don't want to do as we're coming out of this pandemic. And it's often a surprise for many of these tenants who have thought that the situation was resolved when the court decided in their favor. And when that happens, as I've said, it makes it harder to find new housing, likely that a family will end up in worse housing, or probably with no housing at all. So in this off-ramp, we're proposing a method that allows the court to automatically expunge the records of tenants who, because of COVID, fell behind on their rent. In limited circumstances, it would direct the judge to expunge the eviction record once the case is dismissed or if the tenant prevails. For many renters across the state, these past 15 months have been full of anxiety, not only because of the virus, but because of their precarious housing situation. And so it's up to us to make sure that even though this moratorium prevented a much larger disaster, we do not want to create a new one by sticking records on tenants who, through no fault of their own, have not been able to make the rent. Thank you. And I'll pass it on to Senator Dietzick.
Hi, everybody. Good to see people in person. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kerry Dietzick. I have the honor and privilege to represent a portion of Minneapolis. I have Southeast and Northeast and Cedar Riverside and Seward in Minneapolis. And I had 3 homeless camps within walking distance from my house last summer. So I know how precarious housing can be and how even with the eviction moratorium, we still had a large homeless population and problem that continues to grow. So we need, as Representative Ibe said, we need an orderly process to end this eviction moratorium. I've had conversations with the courts, with counties, with city officials, with landlords, and with tenants, and everybody wants that process to go through. We have all this federal money, as you've heard. We need people to go to renthelpmn.org, apply for that money, because we want to keep people in their housing. We want to keep people where they're at. People do better when they have stable housing. So I'm just here to encourage all parties. We're willing to go back to the table and to keep negotiating. I encourage my colleagues in the Senate to come back and let's keep negotiating. I know offers are going back and forth, but this is so important to the state of Minnesota. We need an orderly off-ramp. As I said, I've talked to the cities. They also want that orderly off-ramp, and so I'm going to pass it on to the mayor of Bloomington, and he can tell you more about why it's so important to our local communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks all for being here today. My name is Tim Bussey. I serve as the mayor of the city of Bloomington, Minnesota. Willing to offer the perspective that this is not just the state of Minnesota issue in the aggregate, but it's a very specific issue for cities in Minnesota as well, particularly for the city of Bloomington. Now, I liken this in the middle of this heat wave, I liken this to a winter storm approaching. I mean, when there's a winter storm approaching, we prepare. In Bloomington and in all cities, we prepare. We put salt on the roads. We make sure that our snowplow drivers are on call. Our residents stock up on groceries. They get to the liquor store. We prepare. This is a winter storm coming, and if we don't prepare for this and address this appropriately, I would say shame on us. We see this coming. This isn't a summer squall that just pops up that we aren't prepared for, that we don't have time to get ready for. We see this coming, and we know full well what the impacts are going to be if we don't have an orderly off-ramp to this eviction moratorium. It's going to affect families, it's going to affect individuals, it's going to affect people across the state of Minnesota, particularly here in the metropolitan area. So I really urge to find a solution to this orderly and reasonable and logical off-ramp for this eviction moratorium. In the city of Bloomington, we're working very closely with both renters and landlords. We're working throughout the city with our HRA and our Community Outreach and Engagement Division to make sure that people have the information that they need to understand what the deadlines will be and how they can work through some of the issues that are going to arise. We have received CDBG CV funding, and we're working through our partners at VEAP to make sure that we have rental assistance available to folks who need it to get to the other side of this, to soften this impact. Because again, if we don't do those things, we are not doing the role of government to take care of a problem, an issue, a crisis that is coming at us, that we see coming, and if we don't respond accordingly, as I said, shame on us. So I'd like to next introduce, where did he go? Eric Huckey. I'm sorry, I was going to say Thomas Huckey. Eric Huckey from Minnesota.
Homeline. Yep.
I'll let you do that.
Thanks, Mayor. My name's Eric Huckey. I'm with Homeline. I'm the executive director. We're a statewide tenant advocacy organization. We run a free and confidential tenant hotline, and we serve approximately 1,000 renters per month. We give them free legal advice about their situation. In the past 15 months, we've advised over 6,300 households about legal issues related to the pandemic. As you heard Representative Hausman say, the eviction suspension has helped save lives, thousands of lives during a global public health emergency. That emergency is potentially coming to an end here, but the financial fallout, the economic fallout is not yet. And our clients are directly impacted. We hear about the anxiety that tenants are experiencing. And we're asked regularly whether the suspension is going to be extended because folks are waiting for rental assistance. So I want to share a few stories from our clients. I have probably half a dozen, so I'm not going to get to all of them right now, but I'm happy to share more later if folks want to ask questions. This is exactly why the off-ramp needs meaningful protection, so tenants know about assistance and so that it can come through in time. So a couple examples of the trauma that our clients are facing. All these tenants spoke to us just within the past weeks, the past 7 days, and they volunteered to share their experiences. Brittany from Mound, she had always paid rent on time, but her life has been pure chaos since her husband lost his job in November due to COVID. On June 1st, the landlord showed up with a brand new group of tenants ready to move in. She was able to get them to leave, but she's worried about what her landlord will try next. To prevent her and her 3 kids from becoming homeless because of forces completely outside of her control, she applied for rental assistance back in April and is still waiting. Sierra from Mankato, she got COVID in December, missed work, and her compensation was 1/3 of what she usually makes. Her company in healthcare services wasn't taking the necessary precautions, and this compromised her employment. She's back to work now and has applied for rental assistance a month and a half ago, but yesterday her landlord sent a text saying she has 7 days to pay up or they'll take the keys. She's frightened and unsure of what her landlord might do. And then lastly, I'll just share about Jessica in Faribault. She's a Section 8 voucher participant. If she's evicted, she'd lose that assistance. She has 2 kids under the age of 10 who've been distance learning for most of the pandemic. She's had to give up work opportunities to stay home and teach them. She has an autoimmune disorder and is more at risk of COVID. She's been waiting for 3 months for word back from her rental assistance application and is getting increasingly worried that she's going to lose her voucher even if the money comes through. So this is exactly why there's over $600 million lined up to prevent this, and that's why the focus of legislation to end the suspension cannot be on when evictions begin, but rather when assistance can be easily secured to keep renters housed. I'm going to pass it over to Malik from Hope Community.
Hello, my name is Malik Yahya from Hope Community. I'm the Community Ownership Program Coordinator. Hope Community represents both landlords and tenants. Our community ownership program helps homeowners become landlords, including working with current renters who want to buy the buildings they live in. It takes money to keep a property maintained and in a good shape for residents. And it will be damaging for our tenants who are aspiring to become homeowners. I'm gonna start over. Hello, my name is Malik Yahya. I'm from Hope Community. I'm the Community Ownership Program Coordinator. Hope Community represents both landlords and tenants. Our community ownership program helps tenants become landlords, and including working with current renters who want to buy the buildings they live in. Landlords need to be paid. It takes money to keep property maintained in a good shape for residents, so we need to make sure this public investment gets used to support tenants and in quality and affordable housing. Evictions are bad for both community and tenants, and it will be incredibly damaging for our residents who are aspiring to become homeowners. Now it's time to make sure that we come out of stable at this pandemic. We need off-ramp policies that support both tenants and landlords. As a nonprofit developer, we think there should be more public funding for tenants and landlords to do this process.
Good morning, my name is Mark Jensen. I'm at Urban Homeworks in North Minneapolis. We are a nonprofit housing organization. We have over 138 properties, mainly in North Minneapolis, a few in South Minneapolis and in St. Paul. Our mission is to perpetuate the hope of Jesus Christ through innovative community development. We seek to provide quality, dignified housing to low-wealth communities. And in doing that, we know, I'm speaking as a landlord to a landlord, we know there are people at times you need to have removed from your properties because they're causing fear, risk, damage, other things to the community around them. But we know in Urban Homeworks over this last year, there's a lot of other tools to remove such people than eviction. And we've been able to use those tools. Eviction too many times is a tool of profiteering rather than dealing with the people in your units. So we encourage the landlords to think about those things. As you prepare, as COVID, the restrictions are lifted, we need to be aware that as long as there are funds available for renters, there should not be any evictions for non-payment of rent. Landlords, as we have done over this time, can use their time and energy to help their tenants file the forms, file the paperwork to get that federal and state support, rather than taking probably the same or maybe even more time filing an eviction, which will have lasting impact on their people. We encourage landlords across the state to think about not just the profits in their pockets, but the people who live in their properties. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it now to Representative Howard.
Hi there, my name is Michael Howard. I'm State Representative from Richfield. It's really nice to be here at an in-person press conference and see you all, albeit in the warmth. Due to no fault of their own, Minnesotans have fallen behind on their rent. And we are all here gathered to say that we are not going to allow a pandemic affect the trajectory of Minnesotans' lives. That is why we absolutely need to reach a legislative compromise on an eviction moratorium off-ramp. One that prevents evictions and allows resources to flow to landlords. This is truly a win-win for renters and landlords. And let me just explain one piece of this. Because of the over $500 million in federal resources passed, we have the resources available to help Minnesotans get their heads above water and make sure that there aren't lasting ramifications of the pandemic. If we have a wave of evictions, those landlords will not be able to access those resources. The law passed in Congress specifically says that Minnesotans, renters need to stay housed for landlords to be able to access those resources. That's why it's so vital that we have an eviction moratorium off-ramp that provides a window of time for assistance to flow, and that we have communication between landlords and renters to ensure that resources will flow. That's what we're after, a win-win situation. We need to tell Minnesotans that we have their backs, and that is what an eviction moratorium off-ramp will do. The reality is, COVID-19 was an unprecedented health crisis. But unless we take action, we're going to have an unprecedented housing crisis. That's why there's so much urgency for us to work together to pass an off-ramp. Now, I want to be clear. There is really one obstacle standing in the way of a consensus compromise off-ramp to the eviction moratorium, and it is Senate Republicans. For months, House Democrats have put forward compromise after compromise, even agreeing to work off the Senate bill. But last week we heard from Senate Republicans that it's my way or the highway. Either pass our bill on the eviction moratorium off-ramp, or we are comfortable waiting for the courts to sort this out. We find that to be a position that's untenable. We as legislators should step up and solve this problem and not abdicate our leadership to the courts. In addition, Senate Republicans told us last week that they would only consider an eviction moratorium off-ramp if we wrap it in an entire global deal that includes funding priorities of theirs that are frankly untenable. We urge Senate Republicans to drop those poison pills and join us at the negotiation table. Frankly, we would rather be at a negotiation table instead of a press conference. And from our perspective, you know, we've all had a chance to get vaccinated, I think, and lock us in a room. We're ready to work until we get a deal. It is that important for Minnesotans that we have a compromise on the eviction moratorium off-ramp. So our message to Minnesotans is we are ready to get to work. We believe that's what they want us to do, and we encourage Senate Republicans to join us. And with that, we would take any questions.
To the offer that the Senate Republicans sent your way just a little over an hour, or maybe less than an hour ago, and particularly the piece that says no new policy provisions from either side.
Yeah, so I would, I don't want to be glib, but I would put the offer in quotation marks. On the eviction moratorium off-ramp, they have restated their position that they have, which is still a my way or the highway position, when there are really just a handful of issues in the way of a consensus, one of those being a proper notice going from a landlord to a renter. We think it's pretty reasonable to expect a landlord to send a notice to a renter with how much they owe and the consequences if they don't apply for rental assistance, so that's still an objection in the way. The email that they sent this morning does say that they're dropping some of their policy provisions. They're still insisting on tying unrelated funding provisions, which it's tough to take that anyway as an obstruction to us getting a deal on the eviction moratorium off-ramp.
Either of you, but probably Chair Hausman, please. I'm not judging. but your two committees do not have a great record over the last 2 years of reaching agreement. I mean, you couldn't reach agreement on the $100 million CARES Act money, and the governor had to do that. You're still here at the end of this session. Is this, in fact, an issue that needs to go to leadership and the governor? And if so, when is that going to happen?
You probably all know we're the only divided legislature in the country, and you're seeing the results of that here in the last couple of years. We think we are so close. There is one enormous amount of money, $100 million in housing infrastructure bonds, and we have done that for several years now, but it always goes unrestricted into a process where applicants around the state come with their ideas, and then Minnesota Housing Finance Agency makes the determination, is that an eligible use? For the first time ever, they would want to earmark all of that in ways we haven't done before, in ways that we don't even know reflect what applications are going to come in. So those are the kinds of complexities. Frankly, the off-ramp, as you just heard today, becomes absolutely top of the list in terms of what we need immediately. The budget for Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, it is so small. It's only $10 million above the base target. And so that should be the easiest thing in the world to agree to. And then the $100 million for housing infrastructure bonds. 3 very simple agreements, and it shouldn't be hard.
But it seems to be hard. So
yes,
will this go to the
leadership,
tribunal, and when will that happen?
Actually, we've already sent everything their way, and they've been talking for some time already, I would say. Probably even at the end of the regular session, they were already having conversation. Any more? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.